Hello Marvel Heroes fans! A lot of you, maybe like me, enjoy this game because there are many heroes out there for us to explore and play, and it is really fun. As of today, there are 47 heroes already and more in the pipeline in time to come. So that's great. But on the other hand, a lot of people ask, like, how do you choose a build for your hero? Now, of course, you can read up the forum, check the game guide, watch my channels to see what you could do for your hero. And that's one way, of course. Another way is to try to figure it out yourself. And my apologies if your favorite hero hasn't come up in my channel yet, because it does take time for me to fully explore and see what can be what can I do with the hero to put the best I can do with the hero. And it takes about a week for me to pick up a hero that I'm not familiar with, probably lesser if there's one that I'm readily geared and so on. But nevertheless, it takes time for me to create a video. So I thought, while we are waiting for all this backlog to fulfill, I think I have about 10 heroes that I need to do. Why not I share with you how I build my hero through theory crafting, all right? Now, theory crafting is a big word, and I'm a simple man. As you probably know by now, I don't really like the complexity that much. So I try to simplify everything into easy to understand, kind of like a way for me to find out certain things. So this is what this video is about, is sharing with you how I build my heroes using some very simple mathematical formula and so on. And I'm going to use Invisible Woman as an illustration later on to further explain what certain points are about. All right, so just sit back, enjoy the rest of the video. All right, so the first thing is that what is it that we are trying to do here? Now, it is really about finding a build by mathematically exploring all the powers. So all the powers that you have on your hero. Just go through the mathematics and understand what we are available on the table. All right, and then what I usually do is to pick those with the highest potential. All right? Because all the powers are not equal. All right, and each hero is different as well. But the first thing I usually do is to pick all those highest potential and then attempt to connect them into a rotation so that I can use. Now, what is the alternative? Alternatively is that you can forget about all this theory crafting. You could just keep using retcon device to explore the build. So that is possible, but it takes time, as well as it may consume a lot of retcon device for you to find a build that you want. So you can do it one way, which is picking what you think is correct and then try out on the rate dummy, as time yourself and see what's the time to kill, and then after that reset the whole power, pick a different set of power and do it again, and then reset and do it again. So you could do that. It does take time, and it does take quite a fair bit of retcon devices. For instance, for my Loki video, I have consumed about 25 retcon devices that reset the power as well as the Omega system. Now, it may not seems a lot for most of us who have played this game for a while. We have close to 300 retcon device, but if you think about it, right, 25 retcon device will only last your whole stock doesn't last that long if you keep consuming that level of retcon devices to explore a build. And to me, it's become not sustainable, right? And I wish that there was no such thing as retcon devices. I strongly believe that all builds should be freely explored for us to experiment. But this game just doesn't work that way, all right? So the pros of using a theory crafting is I have saved a lot of time. I've saved a lot of retcon devices. I would like to share that with you, all right? And then you also be able to cook up a reasonable build and tweak from there. Now, what you could do is that take any hero that you have, take any build that you think is fun and strong, and try it out on a dummy, rate dummy, all right? And you may be surprised how long it takes for some scenario to down a rate dummy. There are many reasons, of course. Gearing is one, but using this right power and rotation is another one. And if you could start with a reasonable build, meaning that if mathematically speaking, the build that the the build that you have created is already at a reasonable baseline, you could actually tweak from there. You can pick a slightly different power. You can pick a different gear to sort of like augment whatever build decision that you have. The great thing about using theory crafting is that you have a very strong base to start with. You know with confidence that this build is going to work for you, all right? And you could also cook up different kind of builds. You know, if you are into cosmic farming, you may want to burst kind of the DPS. If you are in the raiding, you may want to sustain a single target DPS, or you want an all-purpose one with kind of survivability in mind. You can build a cosmic patrol kind of like option as well. So it's a lot of freedom when it comes to doing all this build, and you could, with all the mathematical support that you have, you could pick a reasonable build and tweak from there. And it's just extremely satisfying to see payoff when you realize that because you picked the right power, because you have slot in the right rotation, and you see the kill time coming down, and you say, whoa, that is the whole reason why I enjoy so much on this theory crafting, because I think it is probably one of the best way to find a build, all right? But there are some cons as well, all right? So I want to be very transparent with you. It is not like a be-all, end-all solution to everything. Fun is not guaranteed, all right? Whatever power you pick, highest potential, it may not change up at all, it may not be useful in all scenarios at all. And then all this mathematics behind is really biased towards single target, because it's very hard to model a multiple target scenario, because how many targets are we talking about here, right? I mean, and of course anything that has an area tagged to it will hit multiple targets, and each area will have their own different cone and shape and whatnot. So it is extremely hard to model multi-target scenarios. So this theory crafting is very much single target. But having said that, I mean, you think about all the raid, all the cosmic terminal, even the cosmic patrol, by and large, single target is what you need to aim for, right? And also, I understand some heroes have a very good unique design, while some other heroes do not. So this whole modeling does not take care of the unique design. So you could extend to that part, but I feel that it becomes a little bit draggy if I keep. Sometimes you can only use mathematics modeling up to a certain point, beyond which it becomes too complex, and you may as well use some other ways, which I'll talk about in this video, to address that. But just bear in mind, anything to do with those procs from the Omega system, the procs from the unique, they are not in the scope of this one. And also, what is not in scope is that if you have watched my video earlier on about the damage model, you probably recall that the damage model is a 3-dimension thingy, and this theory crafting is only on the normal damage, all right? So it doesn't take care of things like the crit damage and the brutal damage that you need to work on through your gear or through some of the passive abilities, all right? This video is mainly talking about that normal damage layer. And if you recall my previous video on damage model, the normal damage is as important, if not more than the rest of the thing that's out there as well. So it is important to figure out how to get the best out of the normal. Then you augment it with the crit and brutal as well, and the +1 rank and so on. All right. So just bear that in mind when you watch this video. All right. So there are a couple of steps there. There's 7 steps in total. How to find a build using theory crafting. The first one is that you take a level 60 hero. Now, no point doing any hero that's not level 60. If you do not have a level 60 hero in your live server, go into test center and purchase a level 60 potion that is free of charge, by the way. They give the gold to you just for testing. Pump the character up to level 60. All right. Second thing, very important, you have to take off all the gears, because the gear affect the power, affect many other things, all right? So don't leave any gear on, take it off. And make sure that your Omega system and hero synergy is build agnostic. Now, what it means is that, if you have already made decision on your Omega system, do you need to reset it? I would say no, unless you have already made a certain decision within the Omega system that will make something biased. So what do I mean by that? Some heroes can do hybrid, like Ghost Rider can do mental and physical. And you may want to if your omega system is not biased towards these two elements, that's fine. But it's already biased, then all the analysis become a little bit not conclusive, because you're not really exploring the potential of what's out there. You've already made a decision, right? And also some of these melee versus range. Some hero can do both. And you could pick omega system on either one, or you can pick synergy on either one as well. So try to make sure that whatever decision you have made on your omega system and hero synergy is agnostic to the build that you're trying to achieve. All right. But if you are looking at a pure energy player like hero, like Invisible Woman, you have already picked all the omega nodes for the energy. That is fine, because she can do nothing but energy anyway. So, all right. The second thing is a little bit. Second thing to me is a bit tedious, but actually it's quite fun as well, because you can see numbers tell a story, and the story forms as you go through the entire power tree. Now, what you do is that you go into test center, or even the live server as well. You can put 20 points onto any power node. All right, but don't commit it. You can cancel it, right? So you put 20 points to it, max it out, and pick the maximum damage out there. So, like for instance, Conviction here from Shihao, 266707 is the biggest damage you can get from elbow drop. So yeah, take that one for instance, right? Write down the rank 20 max damage output, right? And then I'll show you later. And then the more important thing is that you have to compute the sustained damage per second. DPS is damage per second, meaning that what is the damage output over 1 second window. All right. Now, I'm looking at sustained DPS here, because some of this power has a very strong burst damage, right? Because you can deal a very strong damage within say 1.6 seconds, but then after that, for the next 20-25 seconds, you are doing nothing on this power, right? So always looking at sustained DPS. All right. So if you use this power, if you put 20 points into this power, what can you get in a sustained kind of like scenario? It is very important in things like Ray or Cosmic Patrol. It is less relevant in Cosmic Terminal when most of us, if you are very geared and so on, you can down the boss within like 10 seconds or whatnot. So I mean that scenario, sustained DPS is not that important, but in many scenarios it is important. All right. And then the next thing I would like to look into is my damage per resource spend, because you can spam certain power, because some of the power don't have any cooldown. You can spam it as much as you can. DPS is really high, but then you cannot sustain the spirit or any resource to it. So I look into two key indicators when I pick the power. The first one is sustained DPS. The second one is the resource required to deal the kind of damage. All right, and then you may also look into burst DPS, but to me it is just not relevant when it comes to build selection. Right. So give you first example, direct damage is very easy, right? So you build a spreadsheet and you look at rank 20, maximum damage to 32,000, rate of fire is 1.7, and spirit cost is 11.8. So how do you calculate the damage per second? It just take the damage and multiply by the rate of fire, and you get the damage per second. So that is the kind of like each second that's the amount of damage they can output, right? And then you look at the total damage that you have for this, which is 32k, and there's a spirit cost to it, so you get the damage per spirit. Damage per spirit, the higher the better, all right? Because that means that you are using the resource more efficiently, all right? So this is very simple, direct damage. Second most common power is damage over time. Damage over time will tell you that they're doing twice per second. So 7k twice per second, and it cover a certain duration, right? And it has a certain cost to it. So first of all you work out total damage. You take the damage times 2. That's per second. That is a damage per second, by the way. All right, and then you times the duration, give you total damage. Why is it important to know the total damage? Because you want to know what's the damage per spirit that you spend. So the 99k or 100k close to it total damage divided by 15 for the first row will give you the kind of like damage per spirit spent. All right, the DPS is very simple. Take what's twice per second times 2. Right, that is the DPS. Then you have something called channeled damage. So you can hold a certain hotkey and then it will do a certain damage like twice per second. It's like a damage over time. The difference is that while you are doing channel power, you cannot do anything else, all right? And usually the spirit cost is per second spirit cost, not a one-time spirit cost like the damage over time. So what I do normally is to normalize all my damage into 1 second window. So within 1 second, I do 21k twice per second, so it's 42k. I know that my DPS is going to be 42k because it's damage per second, right? I can work out the damage per spirit as well because I can use the total damage within the 1 second window divided by the spirit cost per second. So that is channel damage. And some of this power has a damage over time with the direct damage component to it. So you have to break down all these things up, right? So you have to have a column on direct damage. You have to have a column on the twice per second, which is damage over time. You know the duration and you know the spirit cost. Work out total damage. Total damage is the direct damage plus the damage over time component, which is whatever twice per second times 2, that's per second, times the duration, which is second. So in this case, it will be 27k plus bracket 3k twice per second, right? Times 2 times 3, that gives you a total damage. Again, you can work out the damage over time, sustained damage over time over the 3 second period, and then you can work out the damage per spirit as well, all right? And some of the direct damage has a cooldown to it, so that's very common, right? You can do like a big hit, and then after that, you can't do anything within that cooldown, right? So what you do is that your damage per second is determined by the cooldown you have. So in this case, 23,000 damage that you dealt, it has a 5 second cooldown. So you have to divide that by 5. And then after that, you work out the spirit cost to it. And from my experience, usually all this direct damage power with cooldown is a little bit more spirit intensive. But you can compare all these things in your model later on, all right? And then some actually have a direct damage over time with direct damage with the cooldown as well. So like for instance, for Rogue, if you steal the Lavalanche from Slug, the raid boss, you have damage twice per second. You have a direct damage component. The duration affects the damage per twice per second kind of thing. And there's a cost to it. And there's also a cooldown, 10 seconds. Now the cooldown is longer than the duration of the damage overtime. So the whole entire damage overtime will expire before the cooldown kicks in. So what should we do? First of all, you have to work out what is the total damage within the window of 10 seconds, right? So you take the direct damage, you take the damage over time times 2 because it's twice per second times the duration 7.8 seconds, right? So that gives you a 55,000 kind of like total damage to the duration of 10 seconds, and then you divide by the 10-second cooldown because that is what you can do within the 10-second windows. And then with the total damage, you can divide by the spirit cost to work out what's the damage per spirit span, all right? So that's how you do it. Some of them has a channel damage, but with the duration and cooldown as well. So, for instance, penance from Ghost Rider signature, it does a very massive 4 times a second kind of like a damage output. So it's a 38k 4 times per second, and then it works for 1.6 seconds. After that, it will have a cooldown of 30 seconds, all right? So first of all, work out total damage. Total damage is whatever in the tooltip say, 38,000 times 4 times 1.6 will give you the total damage within the 1.6 channeled window, all right? But because this power has a 30-second cooldown, you have to divide that with 30 seconds to give you the DPS damage per second, all right? And then you can work out the damage per spirit as well because you know the total damage, you know the spirit cost. But also, you may want to look into burst DPS as well. Very simple. You take the total damage, which is 245,000 divided by the duration of your channel, which is 1.6 seconds, will give you a burst DPS. Now, why is it important? Because sometimes you want to justify, is it worthwhile to use this channel power? Because if it is a DPS loss, meaning that you are better off doing something else rather than this channeled power, even though it seems large on paper, then you don't do it, right? Because it's a DPS loss. You don't invest in point in it. So it's more of a justification and also give you a kind of sense when you do like boss rushing, this is the burst DPS you can get from this particular rotation itself, all right? And also, some of the power has an execute kind of like component to it, meaning that it deals extra damage if the target's health goes down. So you can do a scenario here, in your damage model, in your theory crafting. Very simple, right? You don't need to list everything down. You just think about the common scenario. So, Penance Stairs is Ghost Rider signature. And imagine if you use it on a boss with 50% health, what is the impact, right? So you take it, you multiply that with 50% increase in damage. And then after that, you say, okay, what about if the boss is about to die and I use my signature, what's the DPS I'm getting? You can do that too as well on here. But of course, in this scenario, the burst DPS means more than the DPS itself, because you are unlikely to see 30 seconds on a boss that still have 10% health left. So, but I thought it's important to introduce this element of modeling for you, because you need to look into the kind of like scenario here, right? And you could take a look at Rogue as well. Rogue also has signature that lasts for 6 seconds and has a direct damage, also have a damage overtime to it, has a cooldown to it. So again, work out all the mathematics. Work out what's the total damage, because that is important for your damage per period, because you want to see the cost effectiveness of using that. Also work out what is the damage per second within that cooldown, for instance, all right? So yeah, I talk about scenario. Now, scenario is important because sometimes you can't just look at the build without thinking about what if scenario, right? So for instance, Shi-Hao, the finisher, there are two finisher, right? Final verdict and closing argument, and each of them has a little bit of damage to it. So first of all, very unlikely you will use it with 0 combo point. So that is the base. So if you just look at the build itself, the tooltip, it doesn't inspire, right? Because it's not the true scenario. The true scenario is that you use your finisher at a 5 combo point. So in this case, work out that scenario as well. So you have 61k, you have 69k. Now, then you can build a story, because these are the valid scenario out there. You can compare between the two finisher. One is area, one is single target. So what are you losing if you are sticking onto area one? You're losing about 10%. All right. So immediately you know that, okay, fine. I'm losing 10% of damage because I'm doing area damage. If it was a single target, I would have gained that 10%. So at least there's a story out there. And also I have a column as well, because all the power have different nuances. Some will say vulnerability debuff. Some will say weakening. Some will say it deal extra damage if it is a weakening target, and so on. So all this I put on under the comment, so that to remind me when I select my power later on, what are the nuances I need to pay attention to. All right. So sometimes the power on the tooltip doesn't tell you the so-called the attack speed or so on. Like for instance, Loki has something called illusionary projection. Now, illusionary projection is actually to project an illusion out to a target, and it will cut through any target and deal damage. All right. But of course, the tooltip cannot tell you what's the attack speed, because that depends on the distance you are from the target as well. Like Captain America, you throw the shield hit multiple targets, but how fast does it hit? The tooltip never say, right? So what you need to do is do some like very simple modeling. Stand a distance whereby you would normally attack the target. Like for Loki, I have a single spender that has certain distance from the raid target. So I use that as a gauge, and I use the illusionary projection, the power that I have, and I use a stopwatch. Right, I can use a phone or whatnot, start it, and then I keep doing it. Like I count like, okay, 1 time, 2 time, 3 time, 4 time, 5 times, so on and so forth, and I look at the stopwatch and telling me that I can work out the attack speed from there. And same as Captain America as well, because some of the shield you have to throw and then it will come back to you. It hit twice, but then how fast it comes back to you, you can't really say from the tooltip. So use a timer to just time it yourself. Simple modeling, right? So step 3 is about learning the power, because knowing the mathematics behind the power only tell you one side of the story. At the end of the day, you have to know what each power does. Now, there are many ways to do it. The first one, the easiest one, is go to test center if it's online. I just put 1 point on each one of them, and then And I use a hotbar 1, hotbar 2, hotbar 3 to put all the power in it and just experience that, okay, if I do this, what will happen, right? And you have to pay attention to the strike area, because some of this has a very long area, a long range, some of them has a relatively different kind of range. So take a look at when you mouse over the power, it tells you the kind of like area, strike areas being affecting the target. So pay attention to that as well, because when you pick power that connect to each other, there's no point if all this area doesn't overlap. You run around too much, all right? So that is very important to learn that. But the most important thing when it comes to learning the power is the animation. We talk a lot about damage over time, but we haven't really talked about the animation, because each power may have different animations. Some of them are very snappy, like you hit the button and they just fire, right? And then you can hit something else. But some will have a very long, like the Ghost Rider, right? I'm playing right now. Everything seems so long. Like when I do Inferno, it takes like more than 1 second. When I do Judgment, it takes like chain go out and then come back in. So all these things play a part when you decide which one to do, because some has a different animation, some a different area. Animation itself is also a cost, a hidden cost, because while your hero is animated to do certain power, the hero is not doing anything else, because it's all stuck there doing the animation, right? Test center is one way. Different way is that as you level the hero, you can learn to just pick different power. If they have fit from the gear, that's fine. And to just experience, okay, if I equip this gear with this plus, like they'll grant 5 ranks to whatever power, you can use it and experiment it, and so on. So there are many ways to learn the powers. One is through leveling. Another one, go to test center, just reset the whole thing free of charge. Learn the power, all right? So now it's exciting part, right? So you have done all the job. You have worked out all the mathematics. You have worked out you have understand how each power does. The first thing to do is pick a single spender. What is a single spender? Is that if you want the basic less build, which I think for all of us in an endgame environment, you pick a build that is not a basic. Basic just doesn't cut it. Except for certain heroes like X23 or or Wolverine. Most of the heroes out there, you do not use basic. So you, out of all the toolkits you have, pick a single spender, all right? If your hero has damage over time layer, pick some of those that is relevant. If you have some power with cooldown and whatnot, pick those as well. Some have active buff, like you use it and you buff your power by a certain percentage, and for a certain time, some of them maybe you want to pick it as well, all right, and etc. Because I can't list them all up here, but the more important thing is that you want to chain them up. You want to start picking up the power, and also for me, my personal criteria is that I want to fit everything onto one toolbar, right, one hotbar, because sometimes mathematically speaking, you could do a lot of things out there to get the maximum, but then I want something fun as well for me, so I try to limit myself to this one hotbar, or at most do a F2 if I need to, all right, and put them up in the rotation, all right, and then after that, you have to think about assigning points, right? Because would you like to max it or just put 1 point to it, right? Because sometimes you realize that, well, it doesn't scale up that much, or I just need the vulnerability kind of like debuff. I don't need the damage component because it's just not great. So it is again a decision based on the mathematics behind. Would you like to max it or just 1 point it? Which passive or toggle do you use? Would you like to max your passive, or would you like to just put 1 point in it, right? So these are decisions that I can't really tell you, but from your mathematics model behind it, it should be able to tell a story for you, all right? So don't forget, 1 point in crowd control breaker is important. I feel that it's important because it's good to just get out of the trouble fast, or if there's some debuff on you like a freeze or whatnot, you can just break it free from there. So it's great. I usually map it to the function key F2 because it doesn't use often. I don't usually put on a hotbar, but consider having it, and also consider picking a fast travel power, because a lot of a hero can fly or do a very quick ground move as well. Those are very, very, very important for you to get to the sites very fast. So I would suggest pick those two as well, all right? So now, after you've done all these things, right, and you probably have to pick some gear, make some decision on the Omega system if need to, and you want to try out your build, right, on a raid dummy. You try out, ask yourself, is it easy to execute, right? Has the animation get in the way? Is it fun to use, right? And then at the end of the day, is it effective as well? I mean, how is the DPS? Is it good or is it actually worse? So these are things you can test it out. And I know a lot of heroes may have an issue whereby you can't really use a raid dummy to time because you run out of spirit or not, right? So I presume that you will have a Mac core that's 25. You recover like a spirit and health as well. So use those Mac core for your testing. And then what I'll do is that I'll use a Magneto medallion, epic one. Doesn't matter which medallion you use, because the medallion itself will lower the DPS, of course, time to kill if you pick the wrong one. But the most important thing for me is to actually damage myself while I'm dealing power, so that I can use the Mac core to recover. So for those heroes, you are unable to sit through the entire duration to kill the dummy target and time it. Fear not, use Magneto medallion, damage yourself, recover using the Mac core. At least you can see whether it can sustain or not, all right? And after that, you can put the correct Mac core in medallion in, and it should work for you, all right? So use a Magneto medallion, test it, and then swap it back out. The medallion itself is just it improves the time to kill, of course, but it's not by much. So if you are spending 2.5 minutes trying to down the target with a Magneto medallion, even if you pick the right medallion, it wouldn't help you that much to close the gap, because the gap is there, right? So test it out. And the last step is very much like you just want to fine tune, because after you've done all this theory crafting, after you've picked up all the gear and so on, according to the mathematics behind it, according to all the testing you have, you still would like to go to real world and find and see whether it works or not. And maybe you want to find some ways to improve, and that's fine, because spend a few retcon devices here to improve is a lot better than trying to do it in the blind, like should I try this, should I try that, and after that, before you know it, 25 retcon devices are gone, and ouch, happened to me. So just to recap the couple of steps, 7 steps out there. First of all, get a level 60 hero, get all the gear, make sure that you are your Omega system and synergy is build agnostic. Second one, take a look at the max rank 20 number, all right? Get the max of them, put it on the spreadsheet, work out the damage over time, work out the damage per spirit or resource consumed, all right? The third one is that learn the power, what each power does, the area of strike, the animation. Make sure you understand all these things. Number 4 is that based on all these things all this information you have, chain them all up into a rotation that hopefully it fit one single hotbar, all right? And after that, you say, okay, so that rotation works, then you can start putting points in it, because that is the time when you have to decide, do you want to max it, do you want to 1 point it? So it's nothing in between, right? So the rest is just dump the points in. So you always max those that during dealing the most DPS, and you put 1 point here and there for those that are not that fantastic, all right? Test it out on a raid dummy in the training room, and make sure that you may want to gear it up as well. Use a stopwatch, and then use a Magneto medallion if you need to sustain the kind of spirit over duration of testing, and then go to the real world and really get it sorted, see whether it is really working or not. And I hope by that time it is really working for you, because that is the whole idea of using all this theory crafting and so on. And with that said, that is all about the presentation here. And the next bit I'm going to talk about is using illustration up there. You may want to stay on and think of see how I usually do it. And by the way, Scarlet Witch is going to be has just got reviewed, and I hope she's going to be awesome. And I'll be doing the same thing, the whole power thingy for Scarlet Witch, and figure out what the best for her. And yeah, stay tuned. I mean, she'll be in my channel very soon. I really like her, but I do have a backlog though. I like really a lot. Okay, in this part of the video, we are going to use Invisible Woman as an illustration on what I talked about earlier on. So for Invisible Woman, I hope you have a chance to take a look at my previous video on how I build her, and this is the number behind it. All right, so I always start with the basics, so and to see whether this becomes the benchmark, because basic doesn't require any spirit to execute. In some really rare scenario whereby basic is a necessary, like X23, even Wolverine is a pretty nice one, but in most scenario you don't really use a basic. But nevertheless, just a warm up and get the number out, that become a benchmark, right? So for Invisible Woman, there are a couple main spender. So crashing wave style is one, and then you can work out the damage for the crashing wave style, and then you can work out the rate of fire, spirit cost, and so on and so forth, and give you kind of like DPS as well as damage per spirit. And then for some power, you have a stealth buff for 50%. So that is what I meant about when I talk about the scenario, is the one that you open up a new role just to cater for the kind of scenario, and the DPS of course will increase quite significantly, and you can keep this up at 87% of the time, by the way, for Invisible Woman. And another option is Crushing Force. Crushing Force has a lot of like what if. So it's like this one, oops, sorry, and that one as well. So then you can work out all these things and realize that, okay, so for Crushing Force, you have this is a DPS. You're trying to use this to beat this one, right? So of course it doesn't beat, because for many good reasons. One is because it's Crushing Wave style is a single target range, while the other one is single target is area range. So anything to do with area attack usually is not as high. So at least now, I mean, how much DPS loss we are talking about if you pick this over the other one, all right? And also, you could also look into things like Cascading Force, which is like a channel power. Channel power is twice per second, normalized in 1 second, like I mentioned in the video before, to work out the damage over time. So the Cascading Force actually beat Crushing Force by a fair bit if Crushing Force is not used with all the buff and so on, even at center. But it is very, like, if you manage to get here, then you're almost there, right? So, and of course, it seems that the Crushing Force is better than the Cascading Force if you're looking at that number. But also bear in mind that all this power has a strike area as well, because Cascading Force is actually a very nice front cone to hit all the target in the front, while the Crushing Force is just a round circle somewhere in the middle. So bear in mind when you build it, if you really want to pick area, then you may want to pick an area that you like. So this tells a story, right? The story is telling is that within these three options, Crushing Wave style probably is the best single target spender, and it has quite a good, very efficient in terms of spirit as well. If you get up to that kind of like DPS, look at the spirit efficiency on Crushing Wave style. So it tells a story, right? So you say, okay, this is actually very efficient to use, and you can maintain this one. That is great. So yeah, I mean, and because Invisible Woman doesn't have any area damage kind of like challenge, so you could rely on a single target spender on this one. All right, so that is takeaway point when you look into the Invisible Woman single spender. So another one is the damage over time layer. So you have Suffocate, Storm of Sphere with different kind of damage over time, spirit cost as well. And guess what? It works out to be quite similar in terms of DPS, which is not a surprise because both are having an area range with kind of like a similar size to it, and both are both are pretty efficient in spirit cost, and one with the debuff, the other one duration increase with rank. So you can layer all these three together. I mean, three. Why I say three? Because Storm of Fear can have 2 at max, so you can this one 2, this one 1, right? And you can compare. I mean, damage over time normally is more spirit efficient because you look at this one versus like this one here, right? So it all tells a story. Very important, right? So this all spreadsheet tell a story. So get it? Then how about the Crusher? Crusher is like a summon, the little ball that rolling around. The summon itself has a cooldown, and it has quite a long duration as well. I haven't really put it here because it does nothing while it's rolling around, only for the initial 2.9 seconds. So you could work out the DPS. It seems quite low because it has a very long cooldown. But if you work out the burst damage, which is this damage here, this total damage divided by 3 is actually pretty high, the burst damage. So that's why people like to use Crusher as well. It does a very high burst damage for the initial 2.9 seconds. However, it has a very long cooldown. Never mind, So you can't really rely on that as a sustained DPS, but why not use it as a burst DPS if you can? So again, not just purely focus on the number it tells you. You have to read it in conjunction with the rest of things that matter as well, right? The Invisible Woman has a signature, and you can work out the DPS for the signature, which you want to work out. Is it a DPS law? Is it not? Is it a DPS loss? Is it not? I mean, it seems that the DPS is kind of low, but consider the fact that you don't need any spirit to use it, and also it has an interrupt as well. So that's why I always tell people to, when you play Invisible Woman, rely on the signature to interrupt the boss 4 times over 5 seconds instead of just dump it all out within 1 second, because that is what the signature does. Part of the reason why it has I think it's pretty low DPS because of the interrupt. And then, when you build an Invisible Woman, you want to have a spirit return. So you have two options. Either you use Resonating Wave or you use Seeker's Orb. So again, even if you max it, it has a very tiny little damage. So you can tell the story here, right? So for what is 4K DPS when it comes to all these things here. So it tells you an overall story. It's not going to be great in DPS, but it gives you a very nice, good spirit return. As well, and say why not? I mean that's pretty good, right? So and another option is, of course, to use Seeker's Orbs to restore spirit. It has a slightly higher. Why I say slightly is that it's not even up to a DPS of a basic, right? Because I always use basic as the benchmark, right? So it has a very tiny DPS. Having said that, I mean it also consumes focus as well, because I need the focus to maintain invisible so as to have this buff here, right? So I'm losing. So you always do a calculation in your head, right? Without the self buff, I'm losing this one over this one, right? So I'm losing that much DPS. Can I compensate with this? The answer is no. So should I take it? The answer is of course no, right? So yeah, I hope all this this very short illustration give you some idea of how to use Theorycrafting as the starting point, but it is not a be-all end-all solution, because you still need to rationalize on why some of these power are more useful to use, and also have to take it on a field trip to try out and so on. And I hope this video is useful, and Theorycrafting is always very close to my heart. It's a journey that I'm taking. If you recognize something that I could improve within this whole model, let me know, because I'm still learning through all this whole thing. I hope you find it useful, and if you have any question at all in this game or in this topic, feel free to drop me a note here or in game or anywhere. All right, I will respond to you as soon as I can. All right, bye and have a great day.